I started writing this collective worship on the 16th of March. That's exactly a year after the start of the first lockdown. And it's been an immensely challenging year for all of us in this academy. You've missed a lot of teaching, and the staff of this academy have done everything they can to give you the best possible teaching under the circumstances. But of course it is under these circumstances. This half-term, you would have been looking at British values, politics and democracy in personal development. Some of the things that you would have learned and talked about are individual liberty and rights, respect and tolerance, equity, justice and democracy. For Christians, it will soon be Holy Week, and those things, or a lack of those things, are very clear in the story of Holy Week. Jesus was a Jew living in today what is Israel and Palestine. It wasn't a democracy, it was occupied by the Romans. It was a military dictatorship. So let's look a bit deeper into this story of Holy Week. Jesus was shocked to the authorities by disillusioned supporters. The offer of 30 pieces of silver was enough to persuade Judas Iscariot to lead the chief priests and the elders and the temple guards to a quiet spot away from the crowds where Judas identified Jesus with a hypocritical, a betraying kiss. Even Jesus' right-hand man Peter deserted Jesus when the pressure was on. Peter didn't have the guts to stand by him. Jesus' liberty was taken away and he had no rights. Fear prevented Peter from standing up for Jesus. And isn't that what is going on in the world today? Isn't that what the military are doing in Myanmar, arresting people and using torture and violence to make people afraid? Back to the story. After his arrest, the guards beat Jesus up, and they blindfolded him so he didn't know where the next blow was coming from. And then Jesus was tortured to death. People are still tortured to death today. Going back to the story of Jesus, the prosecuting authorities at the lower courts had already made up their minds, and even though there was no evidence against Jesus, they pronounced him guilty of the charges they'd invented. And the higher court dodged the issue, passing him on to the Roman governor, Pilate, who could find no reason to give Jesus the death penalty. The same way of controlling people is used today. Think of the arrest of Alexei Navalny in Russia. He's arrested because he opposes Vladimir Putin. But what about close to home? What about Britain? Could our courts and justice system be destroyed? And then finally, to the end of the story, it was a mob that condemned Jesus, whipped up into a frenzy by religious leaders and corrupt politicians. They howled for his death. And Jesus never stood a chance. The authorities were never going to resist pressure like that. He was led out and he was executed in the most painful way possible, nailed to a wooden cross. But I want to think about how that asks difficult questions of our democracy. What is the difference between democracy and mob rule? Is something right just because the majority vote for it? If the majority vote for torture and murder of a person or a group of people, is that okay? And what happens if our elected government tries to do something that either our Supreme Court says illegal or breaks an international agreement or an international law? And those questions are relevant to us here and now. And finally, I've looked at this from my Christian point of view. What does your faith say about these questions? Dear Lord, help us to learn tolerance and justice from our faith. Keep us from despair, from fear, from seeking revenge for the wrong done to us. May we keep fighting towards the light, peace, and justice, waiting and working for a new chance. Amen.